Hello and welcome to this brand new podcast here on the WrestleTalk TV YouTube channel and on WrestlePod.com. It is, of course, the Finn Martin Report. Now, regular users of WrestlePod.com will think, well, how does that differ from the Finn Martin review? Well, I'm going to explain that in just a moment. I'm Alex Shane. Do not worry, I'm not Ben Spindler after a night on helium and amphetamine. That's why I sound a bit different. I will be hosting the show from now on, and the reason it's called the Finn Martin Report and not the Finn Martin Review is because what we're going to do is there's so much love out there for Power Slam, and we're going to talk a little bit about that love, that we're going to try and structure this podcast almost like how Power Slam was structured. We'll have a little bit of news from WWE, news from TNA, news from other wrestling companies around the globe. Then we're going to review a big show. This will be, of course, the Royal Rumble. It's the biggest one we can think of at this point in time. We're going to look at the road to WrestleMania. And then, as if that wasn't enough Power Slam-esque in its structure, we are going to have your listener fan questions as well. Joining me on the line, of course, is the man that is... It couldn't be done without him. If he wasn't here, we'd be screwed. Finlay Martin. Finn, how you doing?
Alex, another fabulous introduction. I don't know whether it topped the one for me back in 2014, which I've got to say I was almost red-faced with embarrassment with the extent to which you put me over. But it was a pretty good introduction nonetheless. Great to be back. Great to speak to you again. It's been too long.
It has been too long. And since we spoke, I mean, I have to mention it. Obviously, when we the podcast you're talking about was my Shooting with Shane podcast, and I obviously had to tell the world what a massive Power Slam mark I was. I'm not just going to say a fan. I'm going to say a mark. I mean, I literally used to phone the Finlay Martin Power Slam hotline. Once got a £600 phone bill. I was terrified to go home to get that. I was only about 13, but it was worth it because here I am now, years later. Do not forget WrestleTalk's Facebook page. You can put your questions across to Finlay Martin. He is here to answer those. And we are going, I mean, any question. I got some questions for Finn, and I'm going to get to those later. I mean, where do you start? What was in the briefcase that Vince McMahon allegedly took to the police when Jimmy Snuka was accused of murder? That's a question. Macho Man Randy Savage, that's a question. If you got a question...
What? No, I don't want that Randy Savage question. I don't want the Randy Savage question. Just leave me alone on that Randy Savage question.
I was just stoking the fires of listenership out there, going, "Oh, I've got some good ones." So, but no, listen, we won't be tackling any of those in this one. But almost as controversial, there is the something we'll get to very shortly, the Awesome Kong fallout. I want to get to that in a moment, but first of all, Finn, to stick with a true reflection of the Power Slam format. WWE, what's the big news coming out of WWE right now, in your opinion, that fans should be keeping an eye on before we go obviously get to our Royal Rumble review?
I don't know. I mean, I just watched Raw. I mean, I thought it was, the February 1st Raw broadcast on Monday. I felt it was it was just, there was just no energy to it. It just felt flat. I mean, this came hot on the heels of watching the Lucha Underground Season 2 premiere. Now, I know some people didn't like that.
Jim Cornette.
Well, yeah, he didn't like it. But the amount of effort and imagination that went into that was awe-inspiring. I mean, what a stylish show. I mean, you can't judge Lucha Underground as a wrestling show. I mean, I wrote on my website that it's like from Dusk Till Dawn meets Sin City meets pro wrestling. And that's what it is. It's not supposed to be viewed as a standard wrestling promotion. It is a TV program that contains all these elements and pro wrestling matches. But I mean, I thought the matches came off really well on the Lucha Underground season premiere, and the crowd was so hot. I mean, to me they were as hot as any NXT crowd. Any NXT crowd, with the exception, of course, of the one in London. No one, at Takeover London in December, nothing could top that. But the crowd at the at the Temple, they call it, it was just provided such a vibrant, dense atmosphere, which, as you know, Alex, makes all the difference.
It really does. And Lucha Underground is really splitting people's opinion. But I have to ask you, Finn, if Power Slam was still going, would, similar to how you kind of champion the ECW calls before anybody else in Europe did, is Lucha Underground a company that you would be getting behind?
I think I would be, yeah. I mean, the problem with it is that it's all pre-taped. And this became a problem with TNA as well when it was taping so far in advance. And sometimes you would include, you would think, well, people who are into wrestling, really into wrestling, will look up the results. So do you include the results in the magazine? Which I did do for TNA events. Then people would write and say, oh, you've just spoiled it for me. So you didn't really know which to do for the best. As you know, Alex, you can't please all the people all the time, but you should strive to at least try and keep the majority happy. And I always felt, and to this day I always feel that, you can learn more from criticism than you will from praise. The Lucha Underground thing, it would be sort of difficult because it's, the entire series has been taped. So we know I think we know the next two Lucha champions. I think we know, if you look them up, you can find out the next two people to hold that title. So I'm not sure what I would do. I mean, probably you would say we're going to cover it as it happens so as not to spoil it for the people who want to watch it in order, and those who want to look up the results in advance, well, they can get on with it. So we'll do it this way. I think that's probably the way I would have tackled it. Yes, I think I would have covered it because I think it's just so original. I think it's, in its own way, it's brilliant. It's not supposed to be like a standard wrestling promotion. It's supposed to include all these elements like from Dusk Till Dawn or from Sin City or from, a Rodriguez movie or a Tarantino movie. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like a blend of all that. So, I mean, I hope that I would do. In fact, I don't hope I would do. I definitely would do. I would have, if we could have got photo access, I would have sent a photographer there for sure. And if not, we would have found a way to get pictures, from the company. I'm sure they would have been, compliant in that regard. So, yeah, I think we would have covered it, yeah.
They probably would have sent you really arty Hollywood-style, sort of really well photoshopped images. Now, I find it quite telling, Finn, that obviously, we were going to start talking about WWE. And it's fine. Yeah, and we sort of sidestepped into 5 or 10 minutes about Lucha Underground. Is that a good way of surmising your current view of WWE at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say that. I mean, I watched the Lucha Underground premiere before I watched Raw, and to me, the difference in energy and excitement was enormous. I mean, Raw this week just felt flat. I mean, it really did. I mean, some people were raving about the Kevin Owens versus Dolph Ziggler match. I didn't even think it was that good. I mean, they've had better matches. I just felt the show really didn't deliver. I mean, here we are, we're on the Fast Lane's coming up 2 weeks on Sunday, February 21st. And then we've got WrestleMania on April 3rd. So, I mean, it's, we're at this time of the year now where things should be really exciting, really gripping. And unfortunately, they aren't. I mean, Fastlane to me, they announced on Raw this week that they're going to do another Kalisto versus Alberto Del Rio match at Fastlane. Who needs to see another match between those two?
Do you think maybe they should just rebrand to Bus Lane?
Maybe they should do, yeah. Maybe they should. It just feels like when you watch Raw, we know that lots of people are injured. We know this. But instead of trying to fill those vacancies with new stars by really getting behind people and pushing them, it's just like, well, let's just phone it in because those guys will be back in a few months. They'll start coming back in April, May, June, July. Stars will be back then. We've got the Rock coming up. He's going to make an appearance at WrestleMania. Steve Austin's coming back. Some of these other veterans are here. So let's just fill time. And it doesn't really feel like there's any great, inclination or desire or motivation by WWE to really give us the best quality product that they could. I mean, Kevin Owens versus Dolph Ziggler being a case in point. Dolph Ziggler won that match. It was only a few weeks ago that Ziggler did the job to, I think it was Heath Slater from the Social Outcasts. It's like, what's happened? Owens was this guy who absolutely tore it up at Royal Rumble in the Last Man Standing match, and now he's losing to Dolph Ziggler. Shouldn't Owens be a guy that we should be pushing up the card to replace one of these spots, to fill one of these vacancies on top? I think he should be. They haven't got that many candidates, for the top of the card. he should be one of them. So why the hell did he lose a match on Monday?
I once put forward this suggestion, and if Triple H or Stephanie are out there, on the private plane, they're a bit bored, they might be listening to this podcast. You never know, it could happen.
It's always possible.
There's always possible. There's a 0.1% chance. But what I would do if I was in a position of power in that company, other than take over the world, would be to go and find people. I'm going to give bad examples here. So I'm not, I'm going to say Jake Roberts or Raven, and these are not maybe the best examples, but people of that psychological ilk. Kevin Sullivan, right? People that you know are a little bit argumentative, but understand the business and understand character. And I would say, right, okay, Kevin Sullivan, your job is going to be, you're almost going to be the guardian angel of Bray Wyatt, right? And when an idea is put forward for Bray Wyatt, you can speak to these writers who have just done, like, I don't know, whatever's popular, The Blacklist or whatever show they've just worked on in America. And Kevin Sullivan can fight the corner of somebody who hasn't got the confidence yet to stand up to the writers and say, that's fine, but explain to me why we're doing this, right? It seems like if you're not on that sort of John Cena, Randy Orton, maybe Sheamus list, what is good for your long-term prospects as an act just get overlooked and overwritten really quickly. So you have this, it's not even purpose plan 50-50 booking, as they call it. It's like just bad. It's just bad. It's inconsistent. And I think that's a problem they have. And I don't know what way to fix it, because back in the day, Steve Austin would have said, I'm not jobbing to Brock Lesnar, I'm going home. And obviously WWE learned from those lessons, and they don't want the guy to have that much security and that much power in themselves to be able to fight those decisions. But the downside is people are lacking in star power because there's nobody really there to turn around and say, that makes no sense and I'm not doing it.
Yeah, and plus also, where else are they going to work right now? I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? And this is why we always wanted a strong alternative, or alternatives plural, so that people can say, well, I've had enough of this, I'm going to work there instead.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But, I mean, at the moment, the great contrast, of course, is if you look at NXT, WWE's developmental outfit, and they've already got the NXT TakeOver Dallas, which takes place on April 1st. They've already got all the matches all signed, laid out. Well, not hyped, because that'll take place on the TV shows between now and then. But it's an incredible lineup. Have you seen the lineup for TakeOver Dallas?
No.
Yes, there's Finn Balor versus Samoa Joe for the NXT title. Bayley versus Asuka for the NXT Women's Championship. That should be a heck of a match. The match everyone's looking forward to, who's a fan of tag team wrestling. Dash and Dawson versus Chad Gable and Jason Jordan, who are now known as American Alpha, I believe. Is that right? American
Alpha, yeah.
That's right, yeah. What else have we got? Austin Aries versus Baron Corbin. I mean, Corbin, I've got to say, has made some improvements over the last couple of months. I haven't been a fan of Corbin. I think really I've felt like he's been dead weight for a long time, but he is definitely making progress.
Bit like Jeremy.
Yeah, bit like Jeremy. Sorry,
Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh,
yeah. Our American listeners won't have got that, but I'm just going political on your ass, Finlay. That's what it is.
Oh,
yeah,
Jezza Corbyn, the man of the hour.
he lives across the road from where I grew up.
Is that
Stranger,
right?
yeah, used to see him on a regular basis. Yeah, but I'm digressing. But literally, if you check it out, the Andover estate. I'm from the estate. I'm from the block. Literally, he lived across the road from that, and he still does now. So so I'm on a regular basis. He may be the leader of the United Kingdom, but to put that in perspective, Donald Trump may be the leader of America around about the same time. So what does that job entail anymore?
It'd be hard to really come up with two people more diametrically opposed than Jezza Corbyn and the Donald, wouldn't it really? Anyway, Trump didn't do too well in Iowa. And he started complaining about it and making all these excuses. There's no way Donald Trump is taking up residence in that White House. No way. Anyway, let's get back to
I hope you're right. All right. So,
and also, of course, So, I mean, I think Austin Aries and Baron Corbin, that's Baron Corbin, not Jeremy Corbin. I think that should be at least respectable. And then, of course, we've got the big one, Shinsuke Nakamura versus Sami Zayn. I mean, look at that for a lineup of matches. It's just got, I mean, it could be WWE's card of the year. You know, I think most people are more excited about NXT TakeOver Dallas than they are WrestleMania.
Yeah, well, do you think they might as well just like cut out the middleman and call it NXT takes over indie wrestling forever? Like, because I mean, WWE's taken over all mainstream wrestling now, pretty much. You know, I mean, there's obviously still, you know, you still actually, let me take that back, Western wrestling, and then to an extent in terms of how many live events, the talent, the money they've got, blah blah blah. But now NXT really just is like any. I mean, if you just look at their network. You think, well, they're doing the shoot interviews now. They're doing all the kayfabe commentary style stuff. They've got the best indie wrestling company in the world, even though it's not an indie wrestling company, which is, you know, but it's interesting that I don't know. Maybe do you feel that instead of this desire that fans had for, this is going to be a bit out of the box, right? But instead of that desire that fans had for WWE to go back to 2 hours on a Monday and to become that Attitude Era type company, do you think there's almost a mindset in WWE where it's like, look, we can give you what you want with NXT, but why would we stop having a 3-hour toy advert on television for all of our merchandisable brands? So you've got your Disney, you know, if WWE's Disney, NXT is like Star Wars, and this is Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck's Christmas Vacation. The main roster. I don't know. It just seems, I don't know if we're ever going to get back to what fans want.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say. It's hard to know what their goals are with the main roster, other than to fill time, seemingly without really achieving anything. I mean, it seems to be, you know, that is the mission statement. You know, that is the objective each week. Let's put out 3 hours of Raw and really go nowhere with it. We're not going to get anyone over or really make any new stars or really further any storylines in a meaningful or sort of dynamic way. And then we'll have a 2-hour SmackDown, which will be filled with replays of Raw that really didn't achieve anything, and a lot of matches which we've already seen and which have got like nothing at all, no reason for them to exist, or at least many of them have got no reason to exist. Some do have some storyline support, but the majority don't. So, and I think they've got to a point where, well, you know, our ratings are never going to drop below like 3.3 million, 3.1 million, something like that. We'll always, and then when, you know, we've had a big event and The Rock comes back or a big star comes back, then we'll get up to 4 million like they did last week for the post-Rumble episode. So I think they're really sort of just satisfied with what they're doing. I don't think they feel each week, oh, we could have done better, oh, we could have done more. I think it's more a case of, well, we're just going to do that, we're going to get through it, and then we'll start thinking about next week's episode. I don't think there's any sort of huge master plan in terms of taking what they've got and making it much better. I think they're just content to just really tread water.
And this is the road to WrestleMania, which is even more worrying. Well, listen, we'll talk a little bit about the road to WrestleMania in more detail, but let's move on across to TNA now, which I guess would be, if we were looking at this in Power Slam, TNA would be next on the other page with TNA News. I know you've got some feelings on the whole Awesome Kong, Matt Hardy, Rebby Sky altercation that happened during the TNA UK tour. First of all, give people who are not familiar with it, we covered it on our WTTV news show we have it on this YouTube channel, but what's the story as far as you've heard it?
Well, it was last Friday, wasn't it, the Manchester Arena. Awesome Kong, Kaya Stevens and Rebecca Hardy, Rebby Sky, they'd had some sort of Twitter feud dating back to 2013. I'm sure that's correct.
Right. Okay.
I know that's correct. So there'd been sort of insults hurled back and forth, which is, what happens in the modern era, unfortunately. And why these people can't just rise above it, I don't know, Alex. I always have done, and I don't know whether you always have, but I always have.
Rise above hate, I say.
That's right. So yeah, they had this Twitter feud. Then Rebecca comes into TNA. From what I understand, she didn't dress in the same locker room as the female performers at the Bethlehem tapings last month. Is this make sense to you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so she wasn't in the female wrestling locker room in
Yeah.
Bethlehem, but then during the tour, she
Yeah.
apparently did go into the female wrestling locker
Yeah,
rooms.
but I mean, she was there with there with the son, so I mean, it's sort of understandable, really, that she would have her own dressing room if she's there with the son, which is part of the Matt Hardy storyline, isn't it? Really, that his son's always there. So I mean, that's understandable, really. But then in Manchester, apparently, she decides that she's going to dress in the same room as the other women. Awesome Kong felt this, probably dating back to comments that were made from 2013 onwards. And from what I understand, she asked her or threw her out of the locker room or threw her bags out of the locker room. Is that what you've heard as well?
I would go. I have heard that they had some sort of altercation based on her going into the wrong locker room, and then it got physical. So I'm told. I don't know if that happened next or.
Allegedly, yeah. I saw photos that Rebecca Hardy posted on Facebook of the front of her throat and the back of her neck. Now, obviously, neither you nor I witnessed the attack, so we don't know, for 100% certainty that Kong did this. But yeah, she was pretty badly scratched and marked up. I mean, it was just no laughing matter at all what happened. So apparently, where it happened, how long it lasted, I'm not sure, but Rebecca Hardy was pretty badly roughed up from what I can see. I'm sure you're deeply shocked by it as well. There was a situation, I don't know where her son was at this point. The word was that her son was nearby. So I mean, he's only, what's he? I think he's less than one, isn't he? He's about 6-7 months old, something like that. So it's just a little baby. So I mean, who knows? I find it hard to believe that son was ever in danger, but the fact that son was in the vicinity is still scary enough, and this should never have happened. Whether or not the child was there, it should never have happened, let's face it. But certainly if there's a baby nearby, this should never have happened. So the two were separated and Kong was sent home that night or the next day. She didn't appear in London from what I understand. And yeah, as far as I know, she's, pardon me?
I was going to say, Finn, I have a bit of a controversial viewpoint on this. Are you ready?
Oh, well, sorry, let me just finish.
You're not ready? Oh, okay.
So far as I know, she was sent home the next day, and I don't think she's been fired yet, but I believe she is under suspension. I mean, my take on it is that if all this happened as we believe, as the reports say it did, I don't see how Kong can keep a job. I think TNA is going to have to let her go.
Well, okay, this is where it's going to get controversial, because this is information that I don't think's been in the public domain before, but I'm going to point a finger of blame somewhere else, because, we're not on after TNA, so my TNA gag order handcuffs are off. During the last TNA UK tour, I got a phone call midway through the tour that, if you remember, a lot of British talent, and I was the first promoter on those tours, so I'm quite familiar with the TNA family, although it's changed quite a lot since I run that first tour. There was a situation backstage during the tour last year where a British wrestler, who shall remain unnamed, was essentially bullied into changing in the hallway. And this bullying went on for the entire tour until the rest of the British talent decided, right, we're all going to get changed in the hallway as well. So by the second day of the last UK tour, a lot of the British talent were getting changed in the hallway as a protest against the American talent, right? Not all of them, a few key members of talent. One guy in particular who I know quite well, got a bad attitude, had a bad attitude when he came over here. My point being that this is not the first time that the wrestlers deciding who is and isn't allowed to get changed in what locker room has been taken out of the hands of the management and the tour organisers, and felt that it was fair game to make those decisions when they're essentially getting paid to do a professional job. So it makes me wonder what kind of environment, like, if this was the first time that had happened, it would be one thing, but there's already a precedent that's been set, and on the same tour. So I'm not justifying Awesome Kong and what she did, but I'm just saying there's got to be a point where, like, it has to be looked at. Okay, what level of authority are we allowed to have over these guys, and what are we saying? Because as far as I was aware, nobody got in trouble for the way the British guy was handled on that tour, and quite a few people knew about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the stories of this going back years. I mean, I think The Miz was given a tough time back in the mid-2000s in WWE, from what I understand. I'm pretty sure that possibly you might have heard this story. Jason Harrison, the Dirtbag Kid.
Yep.
I think he might have been did Taz throw him out of a locker room?
Out of the ECW locker room, yeah.
Yeah, that was a famous story from the ECW locker room going back to, I guess, 96 it probably was. So, I mean, that's 20 years ago. So, I mean, these things do happen. You probably witnessed something like this happen. You must have
I've seen stuff that's worse, to be honest with you, and I think it is bad, you know. It's just to me it just seems really strange that in this environment. The worst thing, I went to the Royal Albert Hall, this was when I was a fan, but the day after the Arn Anderson Sid Vicious stabbing incident on a UK tour. Do you remember that happened in '93? So when people are away from home and they're on the road and stuff, things like that are going to happen. But I always think that there's an element where, all right, I guess this is how I'm looking at it from a promoter's perspective, right? If you know there is a multi-year history of tension that's in the public domain on social media, at what point do you not try and mediate before you put those people on the road in a foreign country together where this has already been a problem with other people? There's got to come a point where somebody sits down and says, hold on a second, we may have an issue here, because if it can be traced back on Facebook and Twitter since 2013, surely someone somewhere must have said, we're not going to have any problems, are we? I mean, that's how it would normally be dealt with.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, this is something that should have been addressed. Someone should have had a conversation, and they should have just brought them together, and any tension could have just been like squashed at that point. Thus, the benefit of foresight is, I always say, much better than the benefit of hindsight. So, I mean, yeah, that's something that clearly should have been done, because there was like not far worse than tension. There was rage here, which evidently exploded into violence. You know, I'm not trying to justify any of these. I think it's pathetic that these things happen where you're not dressing in the same locker room as you're not good enough or whatever. I mean, it's just like, it's pro wrestling, for God's sake, you know. I mean, you're all getting in the ring, participating in worked exhibitions. You know, I mean, it's not like, of course, these guys are great athletes, but it's not like there's like a pecking order, like in, say you have people who are Olympic athletes saying, oh, we're not dressing in the same room as people who are like, local club athletes. You know, you could sort of understand egos getting in the way there. In this situation, they're all working for the same company, being paid by the same people. And there should be harmony there, or at least there should be tolerance. Maybe not harmony, but tolerance. And as you say, these people are supposed to be professionals. They don't work that many dates. I mean, TNA doesn't even do that many shows. So, I mean, you would think that they would be able to get along for like 3 shows and then go their separate ways. TNA won't be taping again for probably 6 weeks or something ridiculous. So, I mean, the fact that this happened in a situation where on a three show tour is just like, come on, grow up. And as you say, TNA should have headed this one for the past. There should have been a conversation between TNA officials. They should have got these two together and just sorted it out to prevent any sort of situation like this from happening. I mean, I don't think Rebecca Hardy's going to sue over it, but I mean, in another industry, it's possible she would.
Yeah, I mean, the real unfortunate thing is for people that I'm a fan of Awesome Kong, I always have been. Really think Kia, from my interactions with her, has been a really nice, awesome, down-to-earth person. But from a fan perspective, if it's a situation that could have been dealt with by just sitting these people down, and so people didn't, because ultimately she's one of the most. She's been one of the best female talents that company's ever had on a contract. So to me, okay, it's not the same as the Kurt Angle not being there, but for people that wanted to see women's wrestling, it's a bit of a blow. But anyway, that's let us know what you think out there. Of course, you can leave a comment underneath this video or join WrestleTalk TV on Facebook and on Twitter. Before we move on very quickly...
Just one last...
go for it.
Just one last comment. Yeah, I just think that, really, I mean... In this day and age, I mean, it's almost the level of like teenagers really having a ridiculous war of insults on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and then it erupting into violence. It's like, come on, you know what I mean? I just think it's a bit sad that people who, you know, I think Rebecca Hardy's like 29, Kong's obviously in her 30s, that people of this age cannot just rise above stuff like this.
Rise above hate. I said it earlier.
You did, and it should do. And Kong, as the veteran, she should be setting the example to others. She should be doing that. And she should be saying, right, okay, this happened, this was really annoying, and this person said these things that were very unpleasant, or wrote these things that were very unpleasant, but I'm just going to set the example to others in the locker room by letting it go, you know, as the Frozen song goes, let it go, and just setting the example that others can emulate. And that's what she should have been doing. She shouldn't have been reacting like this.
Well, from rising above hate to rising above this section in my format, can I do my plug now?
Of course you can.
Awesome. All right, so just very quickly, before we move on to the next section, make sure you check out British Wrestling Weekly. It airs on our WrestleTalk TV YouTube channel for 7 days. You can see that every Saturday. Also, if you live around the United Kingdom, you can find it on channel number 8 on Freeview in places like Birmingham, Leeds, Newcastle, Bristol, Wales. It's everywhere. But the easiest place is, of course, on the WrestleTalk TV YouTube channel, where you can also see the WrestleTalk TV News. Was the WTTV News, but we thought we're going to keep it all on brand, so it's WrestleTalk News. You can check that out every Tuesday to Friday. And if you want more British wrestling and WrestleTalk TV goodness, make sure you check out our 2 websites, britishwrestling.tv and wrestletalk.tv as well. I have to keep mentioning these quick plugs. Now, very quickly, we should move into, before we go into our sort of Rumble breakdown, our Royal Grumble, as I think we'll call it. I'd like to ask Finn, in the elsewhere section, right? Everywhere else outside of TNA, Lucha Underground and WWE, see, I squeezed Lucha Underground into there. What's the big news story as far as you're concerned? And to guide the conversation a little bit, I would like to just add something. New Japan. Now, what should I just as a fan of Power Slam, I'm really interested, Finn. What is your opinion on the current situation with New Japan after the sort of the purging of the Bullet Club thanks to WWE?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say before, you were talking about how WWE is trying to take everything over. In many ways, they've just taken 4 of their guys.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, you know, Nakamura was their number 2 guy, number 3 maybe, but definitely one of the top 3 guys with Tanahashi and Okada. So I mean, it's a huge loss. I mean, they gave him a rousing send-off on Saturday, I think it was, at Korakuen Hall, and as well he should have done. So, yeah, I mean, can they replace him? Very difficult to replace. I don't know whether they could replace him. So, I mean, Styles was just amazing, had a fantastic, I think about 21 months he was there. I think he joined April 2014. So, yeah, nearly 2 years he was there, 2-time IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Unbelievable matches there. I mean, his record of achievement in that company was just incredible. Did you see Styles' match with Nakamura at the Dome Show?
Yeah, and Nakamura, I've got to tell you, Finn, Nakamura is possibly my favourite wrestler right now. And people have asked me who aren't familiar with New Japan, because I don't know if you know, but I'm actually one of the UK commentators for New Japan on the Fighting Spirit Wrestling show. So I play a heel commentator for New Japan and AAA. And I hadn't seen New Japan in forever when I started doing that job. And by the end of 2 series, I've done like 52 hours of it at least now. And I just love Nakamura. And people say, what is it about Nakamura? And my worry is that the thing that made Nakamura great in New Japan will be very, very hard to capture in NXT. Well, not so much NXT, but definitely the WWE. I think that's going to be... I'm worried they're going to turn him like... they're going to... Because if you look at his entrances, Nakamura, it's like it works. He's so edgy and it's so cool in Japan. But I worry that WWE are going to Disneyfy it, you know? And
yeah.
sort of... Yeah.
I mean, the thing is with Nakamura, for many years, he didn't really have that much personality. During New Japan's dark days of really 2005, 2006, 2007, when him and Tanahashi, after Lesnar left, when him and Tanahashi were the company was depending upon them to be their, you know, 2 new stars that were going to carry the company. And there was a lot of complaints about him not having any personality. So, of course, by the end he did. But it did take him a long time to develop that. And also you have that thing as well where it takes the wrestling fans time as well to really get the character.
Yeah.
And often with a wrestling character, it's not something that really you can explain. It's something you just understand, through familiarity and seeing it every week and seeing it develop. So I do understand what you mean. I mean, is Vince going to understand this character? I mean, and then another thing with Nakamura, he's in good shape, but he's slender. He doesn't have any of that, really much muscle width or definition. I mean, he's tall, but he doesn't have that main eventer sort of look that Vince demands.
Yeah. So he reminds me of a Japanese Barry Windham. I know it sounds really weird, but I was a big fan of Barry Windham, but he was very gangly and long and awkwardly shaped, but the guy could just work, and so many people just say that Barry Windham was a great wrestler. But when he went to WWE, he was like, well, he's the Widowmaker to start with, but nothing... Yeah. I don't know if Vince can... I'm worried that Vince is going to look at this Asian guy he's got coming in, and the first reference that's going to fit in with the Nakamura crazy-eyed sort of entrance with all the women is Big Trouble in Little China, and before you know it, he's just going to try and make him into this crazy Japanese drugged-up wizard type thing, and not the Nakamura party animal / Michael Jackson tribute act type thing that we all love about him.
Yeah, it's really... I mean, the thing is, it's sort of... For many years, I was accused of, you're too negative, Finlay, you always fear the worst, blah, blah, blah. But more often than not, I feel that my fears were unfortunately proven to be true, to be correct when it happened. Yeah. And you've got someone like Nakamura, and you think, well, how is he going to fit into Vince McMahon's vision of that company? And it's really hard to know. I mean, you look at Tyler Breeze. I know Tyler Breeze obviously is not Japanese, but he had a really good thing going in NXT. He didn't win the NXT heavyweight title, but he came close and he was a proper top guy in there. Had a really good gimmick. It was a sort of like a modern day Shawn Michaels, boy toy type gimmick. And I remember looking at him and thinking, this guy's really good. He looks amazing. He's got the gimmick down. He's got the... he's pretty charismatic. He understands his character. He knows how to play it, but he's very small. How is this guy going to fit into Vince McMahon's WWE? And it's just been a disaster for him. And you sort of knew, you wanted to believe, and we as wrestling fans, we want to believe that it can be better. We want to believe that this person will become a star and that this person will get over and WWE will do the right thing with this person. That's what keeps us coming back for more. It's, I guess, like being a football fan, and when your team's losing, you're like, well, I'm not going to give up the faith because this is my team. I'm sticking with them. And it's the same with WWE. And you look at Breeze. I mean, just watched, as I said, just watched Raw, February 1st Raw, and he lost a meaningless match to Titus O'Neil, and it was just a filler match. I mean, he was paired with Summer Rae, and then they just did this split for no reason. There was no explanation offered as to why Summer Rae and Tyler Breeze were separating, and I don't think I've seen Summer Rae since. So I really feel like Nakamura could, the guy's so talented, but when you think there's so many people over the years who've been so talented that have just not been used to the best of their abilities. And Vince, as CM Punk famously said in a Power Slam interview back in 2004, Vince has to be a fan of yours in order for you to make it in this company. Unless, of course, you have a Daniel Bryan situation, which we had in late 2013, 2014, late 2013, early 2014 rather, where the fans demanded it. I mean, the fans strong-armed Vince into doing the right thing. But, I mean, there's been very few occasions when that's happened. Obviously, it happened with Bryan. It's happened so infrequently with other people. So, yeah, I mean, I hope I think Nakamura will do well in NXT. I think he'll be over immediately because that's a hardcore crowd and they're probably going to know who he is, or at least will have. I think he got a really good reaction at the tapings when they announced that his debut was going to be Dallas. So I do have confidence that he will do well in NXT. But when he gets the call up to main roster WWE, I do worry for him.
Careful, Japan, they're coming for you. That's all I'm going to say. You're next on their list. There's a big globe dartboard in WWE's head office, and the UK has just been struck with an NXT-shaped dart, and now Japan is next on there. Okay, so...
Well, sorry, just to cover the other two, I
had another plug, Finn. No, I'm just joking.
Sorry. All right. Yeah, so obviously they've brought Styles in, AJ Styles in. He was really over at Royal Rumble, and since then he just seems to be becoming progressively less over. I mean, I don't understand that segment on Raw on Monday with The Miz. Don't understand what they were trying to achieve with that. No idea. It didn't do Styles any favours at all. Okay, he ended up beating The Miz down at the end. I haven't read the spoilers for SmackDown, but I'm quite sure that Styles will have beaten The Miz at the SmackDown tapings. That's for the episode of SmackDown, which is broadcast tonight in the States. So I'm sure he did beat The Miz. But I mean, where's that going? You know, I mean, we've got Miz there humiliating him. Miz, I've got to say, did a really good job in the segment. You know, full marks to The Miz for remembering all those lines. I think The Miz's delivery is great. I really like the character, but it's a first or second match character. Styles should not be mixing with this guy. He should be, you know, Miz should not be humiliating Styles in his second week in the company. This should not be happening. As for Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson, well, Doc Gallows has been there before. Obviously, it was Festus, which, you know, wasn't exactly a main eventer. And then he was a member of CM Punk Straight Edge Society. So, I mean, he did all right. I mean, Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows, hell of a team. I mean, they had the match they had at the Dome, January 4th. One, if you haven't, anyone listening to this hasn't seen that match, watch that match. Hell of a match. I mean, it was overshadowed by the other matches on the Dome Show card, but that was a hell of a tag team match. So, I mean, I want to believe that Anderson and Gallows will do well. I hope they let them do well. The fear, of course, is that they become the 2016 version of the Basham brothers.
Oh, yeah, there is that. They do have that look. Yeah, oh, that's a good point. Particularly, Carl Anderson has the shiniest cue ball head I've ever seen. And and I've seen Steve Austin in his prime. Well, Finn, we better, just to keep within time, I guess we should move on to the Royal Rumble. And I'm going to try and, because obviously we've got these listener/former Power Slam reader questions that I want to get through. So let's try and condense the Royal Rumble if we can, because obviously there's a lot being done on it. But what was your, if you were using, let's not use Dave Meltzer's star rating, but if you were giving it a 1 to 10, what would you have given the Royal Rumble as an actual card and also as a match this year?
The match itself? I would say probably maybe a 6, maybe a 6, something like that. I did quite enjoy it. I mean, we're not going to have time to go through it here, because if you actually were to analyse that match piece by piece, you would find so many things about it that are just unanswerable, beyond bewildering. You know what I mean? Why was Jericho in the match for like 51 minutes? Why? I've never in the history of wrestling has one man spent more time in a battle royal and done less. What did he contribute to that match? I have no idea. Shouldn't that role have been given to someone in his 20s or early 30s, not someone who's 45? The other thing I didn't get as well about the Jericho thing was Braun Strowman put his chokehold on Big Show and hurled him out of the ring. In that match, Braun Strowman put his chokehold on Jericho twice, and yet still didn't hurl him out of the ring. Didn't understand that. No idea. Thought AJ Styles did well in the match, really over from the start. I thought he had a pretty good showing in the match. Enjoyed what Owens contributed, enjoyed what Sami Zayn contributed to it. It was definitely a bad night for Roman Reigns. Booed out of the building from the start. Then, of course, he disappeared for half an hour, then comes back. Badly booed at the end. Then Triple H was cheered when he eliminated Reigns, so it's that's really just, you look at the good work they did with Reigns in December, and he appeared to be getting over as a face, and then we're right back to square one at the Rumble.
Do you think that the way they booked Reigns in the Rumble was badly flawed?
It was wrong. It was that as well. So, he was taken out of the match. The whole premise of the Rumble was one versus all. He wasn't in it for, I'm not sure of the exact time that he wasn't in the ring, but it was a long time. So it was not one versus all. So, the Iron Man of that match was Chris Jericho, which again made no sense at all. Reigns comes back, booed when he comes back, and then when Triple H comes out, Reigns acted scared. Why? he just hospitalized Triple H for like 5 weeks. Why would he be afraid of him? And then Triple H eliminated him very easily. I mean, I thought that the final scene where H and Dean Ambrose had their exchange, I thought that was pretty hot. And then Triple H won. I understand why it happened. I don't know whether it was the right decision or not. I mean, if Roman Reigns had been cheered, then the right decision to me would have been Reigns retaining the belt, because it was too soon for him to fail again, in my opinion. But because he was booed so savagely, it actually felt like the right decision on the night for him to lose the belt. So I'm sort of torn there. I mean, you look at Reigns now, since he just sort of seems like just another guy. I mean, he's had 2 world heavyweight title reigns. The first one lasted a few minutes, and the second one lasted less than 5 weeks. I mean, so if he wins the title at WrestleMania, as most expect he will, this will be his 3rd world heavyweight title reign. I mean, it's like, how can he be on number 3 already?
Can I ask you a question, Finn, which it's slightly conspiratorial, but don't worry, it's not about whether or not we actually landed on the moon. I already have my beliefs on that, and I'm just joking. Listen.
You're not joking, are you? You're not even joking.
To be honest, there's a really good documentary about whether or not Stanley... it's called Room 237, about whether or not Stanley Kubrick was brought in to fake the moon landings. It's interesting, don't know how, but check it out, Finn, you'll love it. But let me stay on topic, right? Because otherwise I'll end up talking about Council Estates and Jeremy Corbyn.
Does Room 237 pertain to the room in The Shining?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Check
I
it.
remember reading a review of that of that documentary, but I've never seen it. I will check it out, Alex.
Very interesting. But no, here's my somewhat conspiracy theory right now. Roman Reigns, when the way Reigns was booked, now I still have a hand in the booking of a British wrestling company that we make a weekly TV show for, and sometimes a situation will be brought to me, and it'll be like, okay, if we do this, surely this guy might get booed or that might backfire. But there are real simple human emotional traits that you can track and then mould a little bit so the outcome that you get is the one that you desired. And there are things that when it goes wrong, and somebody says, why did that go wrong? You can clearly say, well, if you'd have just told me before you'd done it, I would have told you that was not going to work, right? Now, the booking of Reigns and what you've just said there, it seemed clear that unless nobody with any common sense looked at the booking of the Rumble, it was designed so that Triple H would get cheered when he won the belt, right? Because otherwise Reigns would have stayed in the ring as opposed to going out and taking a break. So do you think that potentially there's an element here where Triple H is playing this tweener role where he's the heir apparent of the company, but it's not a deadlock that he's going to get that because it would be down to shareholders. Unless he buys it from Vince, the shareholders would have to decide who would take that role on at some point, right? Well, if Vince pops his clogs.
Well, it's possible that Vince could just will his shares to Stephanie and Triple H, which is, in my opinion, what will happen. But you are right, that feasibly could happen, yes. So
then the next thing is, at the same time, he's the spokesperson dealing with NXT. He's the guy trying to bring the smart fans on board with the NXT journey and talking to journalists. So there seems this weird, I don't like, a weird parallel world where in one world Triple H is meant to be the bad guy foe to the Mickey Mouse of the the child Disney wrestling company, but then he's also the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the adult-based Star Wars franchise. Does that make sense? So now, do you think that it was not an oversight that was booked that way so that Triple H would get that reaction when he won?
Well, I mean, I'm sure more thought went into Triple H's contributions and presentation in the Rumble than everyone else combined. So you have to imagine, we've got these people with all this experience and all this knowledge. They must have realised what you've just said. They must have known that would be the outcome. In which case, it can only lead you to the conclusion that they sought the reaction from the crowd. Which then makes you think, well, hang on a minute, Roman Reigns is the company's top babyface. They've stated that he's the company's top babyface in John Cena's absence. So why are they booking him to fail? Why are they putting him in a situation that does not flatter him? I don't understand it. And this happens all the time with WWE. Things like this happen all the time. There's so many unanswered and worse, unanswerable questions.
Wow.
You know, I mean, there just are. It's like, well, why would you set this guy up to fail? He's the fella that apparently is going to win the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania. Now, the problem with that outcome is that he's going to have a terrible time. The fans are going to be all over him. They were all over him in Birmingham, Alabama. Not quite to the level that they were in Orlando for the Royal Rumble, but he was getting pretty heavily booed in Birmingham, Alabama on Raw on Monday. So, I mean, the whole thing's just bizarre because Reigns was booed so, vehemently at the Royal Rumble, and yet if you watched Raw the next night, they had like a little highlight package of the Royal Rumble, and they changed the soundtrack so Reigns was cheered.
That old chestnut.
Which is just, I remember they had to do that back in '92 when Sid Justice, was it Sid? I think he was still Sid Justice.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe it was Sid. Well, anyway, when he was Sid, anyway.
Sid Justice.
He eliminated Hulk Hogan from the Royal Rumble, and fans ended up cheering Sid. So what they had to do was they had to change the soundtrack from cheers to jeers to boos, so that so that fans wouldn't start throwing the weight of their support behind Sid instead of the Hulkster.
That was a good Rumble. Where would you have rated number 2 on the Finlay Martin 1-to-10 ratio?
The 1992 Rumble?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been... I mean, it was an amazing match. I haven't watched it probably since the 90s, so I don't know how it would hold up now, but I mean, it's a match everyone remembers, so I mean, it would have to be a 9 or a 10, wouldn't it really?
That's the one to beat then.
Well, I was always a huge fan as well of the Rumble, which ended with the Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, lengthy showdown at the end, which I think was the 2008 Rumble, I believe. Or I could be wrong about that. Maybe it was another Rumble. But anyways, it was the one with about an 8 or 9 minute wrestling match at the end,
right,
between Michaels and the Undertaker. I was a big fan of that match. I thought it really ended that match with a bang.
Well, talking of Michaels and Undertaker, it's a good lead-in to WrestleMania. Now, we are running dangerously short on time, so I want to see if I can get, rather than do a big... we've got a long time to build to WrestleMania, but I want to ask you this one Mania-related question. Hulk Hogan, Dave Meltzer at the Wrestling Observer has reported that it's not a lock, but Hogan will be in Dallas, and there is a chance that a deal may still be done. With everything that's gone down, Finn, with the losing of major stars and injuries, do you think that we will see Hogan at WrestleMania? And if we do, is it a bad move?
Well, I mean, it's hard to... Is it too soon for him to return? I don't know whether he'll be there. I mean, I think by then, I remember speaking to someone in Florida right after the whole racism thing broke, and he told me that lots of people just didn't care about this, which I thought was really sad, because those comments that Hogan made, admittedly he didn't do them, he didn't realise he was being recorded, but those comments were still terrible. He should never have made them. So I understood WWE's reaction to that, understood why they, cut all ties with him. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a U-turn, isn't it? In that they booted him out of the Hall of Fame, they stopped selling his merchandise, and he was just like, persona non grata, he was gone. And then at WrestleMania, he's back. So it would seem like, and also the thing is as well, WrestleMania is the show that all the mainstream entertainment people cover. We know that. Now, if Hogan is there, the story that resulted in Hogan being excommunicated by Vince, will then be brought up, and that will be written about in the same, the next paragraph, or said in the same breath as WrestleMania. So it's going to be brought up again, and maybe that's not the time for Hogan to return, because that's usually the time when Vince and Kevin Dunn and all these other people, they love the mainstream publicity, and they want all that mainstream publicity to be flattering, to be positive, to be nice. And if Hogan is there, then it's going to open these, it's not even really old wounds. That story's going to be brought back. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's too soon for him to come back. I really don't have a strong opinion about the Hogan situation, other than I understand why WWE did what it did. In many ways, it had to do that.
Is it
So,
weird that when you said Vince excommunicated Hogan, I just imagined Vince dressed as the Pope riding around a little Pope mobile? It's a fantastic
yeah.
image.
Yeah, I mean I mean that's the thing. I mean if Hogan comes back at WrestleMania and the timing of course it would be perfect, he'd get a great reaction and everything, and it'd be one of those, it would be an amazing moment. You know it would be, because Hogan, he's the maestro. He knows how to conduct that audience. You know what I mean? He can just he's to me the greatest crowd worker ever, bar none. Bar none, the greatest crowd worker ever. And the guy, to me, as I've got older, I've developed a huge appreciation for what Hogan could do.
Yeah.
You know, his talent for manipulating the audience was amazing, you know, and timing and things like that, just the little things. And, you know, for many years you would just dwell, oh, this guy's rubbish, he can only do a few things. And it's just, as you got older and you appreciate the, you know, nuances of wrestling, all these other little things, you come to understand just how good he was at the main thing, which was getting people in the building and making them believe that they'd just seen a classic match, even though he did hardly anything in it.
Finn, one of the greatest wrestling matches that I've ever seen, and I always get ripped to shreds for saying this, but in terms of, if you're talking stadium wrestling, Hogan versus Rock as a spectacle, right? In terms of, you know, if wrestling... it was a paint by numbers stadium match, but there's a scene in it when you go back and you watch Hogan has got Rock in a headlock, and if you go back and you watch it, Hogan's got this headlock on Rock, and then he stops and just literally does a full turn so that he does that. He still keeps the headlock. He just tiptoes around the ring and then applies it facing the opposite side as all the flash bulbs are going off. Hogan in the middle of WrestleMania is working both sides of the stadium and the photographers with a headlock. Do you know what I mean? It's so obvious. You watch it back, but he gets it because they're those big. When do his biceps look biggest? When he's got a headlock on and when he's posing, right? So he knows what the guys anyway. So I totally agree. Well, listen,
he used to have a particular pose when he was being interviewed by Gene Okerlund, and you could tell that he'd spent a long time, you know, in front of the mirror working out what the best pose was, and he'd actually be there doing that pose when the camera just came on him. So you know,
right. I know the one. Yeah,
his best pose,
the downwards arm flex type thing. I know it. All right, well, listen, we got some fan questions, and the first one is from Nathaniel Westwood. He joined us on our Facebook discussion section. That's where you can come and join us and put these questions for Finlay Martin. He says, Kevin Dunn appears to be the originator of many of the worst ideas we attribute to Vince, in particular about size, beauty, TV structure, and voices. NXT is noticeably different. How much of this is down to Kevin Dunn's sphere of influence?
Well, I think WrestleMania really answers that question for you. If you look at WrestleMania each year, you know, the number one thing for Kevin Dunn is the way it all looks. Then the number two thing is the fireworks. Then the next thing is the celebrities or the musical acts, making sure that they've got enough time and it's all shot beautifully. So the whole production, he is the production man, and that is his number one thing, how it looks. That is his job, to make it look as good as possible. So absolutely, he has tremendous influence with Vince. I mean, they've been working together for, it's over 30 years now, isn't it? 30, I don't know, we did a story some years ago on Kevin Dunn, but it's over 30 years that they've been together. So, I mean, Kevin Dunn has tremendous power with Vince. I wouldn't say they're equals, but it's not far off. So, I mean, I'm sure Kevin thinks he probably cannot be replaced. I have a feeling he will be as soon as Triple H takes over. Kevin Dunn he's to me, he's the guy. His only real concern is aesthetics. That's all he's really interested in, is making things look good. You know, the wrestling matches, well, they're just part of the show, but they're down the pecking order from all that other stuff. You know, I always feel that the WrestleMania at MetLife Stadium was Kevin Dunn's finest hour as far as production went. I thought that the stadium looked amazing. And in many ways, I got a lot of respect for what Kevin Dunn does, but I don't think it should be at the expense of why we're fans, which is the matches. But can you have both? And Kevin Dunn would argue, no, we're here to put on a show. We're here to make this look as good as it can be. That's what WWE fans expect. If you want to watch great matches, then go and watch NXT TakeOver Dallas. Or go and watch Alex Shane's wrestling promotion that he books, Maybe he wouldn't suggest that. But you know what I mean? Kevin Dunn, if his whole philosophy is that we're a show, we're an entertainment thing. It's not really about the wrestling. That's just a small part of what we do.
They make movies.
They make movies, that's right, they do make movies.
It sounds so much sleazier when it's said with a mouthful of water. Did you not think that? In Beyond the Mat, we make movies. Anyway, all right, well, listen, we got one. I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly. Chris Villeneuve. Chris, I apologise, but it's your question. He asks, when people talk about people backstage in WWE being Vince's guys or Triple H and Stephanie's guys, who are they mainly referring to?
Well, who do you think they're referring to, Alex?
I would say Vince's guys are your Orton, your John Cena, your The Undertaker.
Yes.
Possibly now, strangely, maybe Chris Jericho.
Without doubt. Chris Jericho is absolutely on board with Vince. I mean, why else was he in that Royal Rumble match for 51 minutes? Why else did he survive Braun Strowman's choke? I mean, why else? He had that match with AJ Styles on Raw last week. And Jericho's just been reminding us of how great it was constantly. So Jericho's definitely one of Vince's guys. Triple H's guys. Well, everyone knows Sheamus was one of Triple H's guys. He would train with him and stuff. So, I mean, I'm not really sure who Stephanie McMahon's guys are. Who would really be classed as Stephanie McMahon's guys in 2016?
Well, definitely not Paul Heyman.
Yeah. I mean, another thing on Raw Monday, Paul Heyman was there on commentary, and he did it for the main event, and he did hardly anything. Well, why? Why was that? I just didn't get it. You've got this guy, probably because we don't want him overshadowing our regulars. That's probably it. But if Paul Heyman was one of Vince's guys, or Stephanie's guys, or Triple H's guys, you can be damn sure that he would have been overshadowing the regulars. So, it definitely does pay to be in with the guys, in with the bigwigs,
the clicks,
so
the power clicks. Do you think Kevin Dunn has one? Do you think that you can be a Kevin Dunn guy?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Kevin Dunn's guys are probably like Vince's guys. They're the people that that look, and women as well, who look good.
It's the worst selling T-shirt of all time, isn't it? I'm a Kevin Dunn guy.
Yeah, probably is. I'm surprised someone hasn't done it.
My graphic designer is currently mocking it up as we speak. I saw him. He's typing ferociously. Well, I hope that's typing. The window's a bit blurry. Either that or he's really enjoying the podcast. All right. Well, next one. Craig H asks, who were...
just for comedy value, I'm a Kevin Dunn guy. I mean, I think it could well rival Austin 316 in terms of sales.
Let's get it. Let's get it made. And this one from Craig H. He asks, who were your best sources and how much did you pay them for information? I don't know. I don't know if this was for the conversation that we're having here or for our new MI5 podcast we're doing. I'm not sure. But Finn, who were your best sources?
Oh, well, you didn't pay anyone. I've got to say, I did pay for a couple of interviews. I paid for 2 interviews when I was running Power Slam, but only two. The first one was with someone who really needed the money, and the second one was with somebody that it really would have felt incomplete if we didn't have the interview with him in that magazine. The second one was Vader, Leon White. We had to pay for that interview, but that was one of only 2 interviews we ever paid for. As far as paying for information, no, I never did that. And as far as sources, I think Alex was my number 1 source.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's it. I've just stitched you up good and proper now, haven't I?
Yeah.
No, in all seriousness.
No, but we had a lot of conversations, didn't we? Yeah.
There were usually conversations about things like, Is the check in the post, Alex? I think those were usually the conversations, weren't they?
That's what happened with all those. I was trying to slowly get you back after all those adverts that we put in Power Slam. I was trying to get back that £600 phone bill, 1/4 page ad at a time.
That's it. I mean, in many ways, you probably did pay me for those adverts, but just like over 10 years earlier.
That's what. Advance pay. Yeah.
But I mean, over the years, you came to know people, you would email people, and when you would do like an interview with someone, you would keep in touch with them. And there was just lots of information would be batted around. You would just get to know people. And I would rather not disclose the names of them. It's, pretty much everyone that you ever interviewed would be somebody that you would communicate with again, or maybe not everyone, but lots of people that you interviewed. You would communicate with them again in terms of clarifying things, and then through them you would then hear about other things, and you would get to speak to other people through them. And I would rather not go into that. It's not that it's some great secret. It's just more the sort of the process of being in the business and speaking to people. And getting your name and your magazine's name out there, and that then results in people sending you tidbits of information and letting you know things, or being more inclined to speak to you than they would have been when the magazine just launched. So it's really just something that happens over the passage of time. So now, what I do now, I feel like, I'm sort of cut off really from what's going on in wrestling to some extent, because I'm just, writing the books and stuff. So you don't feel as though I'm not really in that position where you need that information. You've got to have it like today, or you've got to clarify something. I don't feel like I'm in that job anymore. I'm not really in that role anymore. But it is still nice to email people, and that's the good thing about modern communication. There's lots of ways to get in touch with people. So it is nice to speak to people, and for those people to just tell you stuff or confirm stuff. So yeah, I'm still in touch with quite a few people in wrestling. Not as many as when I was running Power Slam, but quite a few.
Because there was no internet when Superstars of Wrestling / Power Slam started, so those sources would have had to send that information via carrier pigeon, I'm assuming. You'd have had these little pigeon parcels delivered saying, you never guess who's just had a fight backstage.
Well, sometimes you would just know somebody, and like, for instance, you would get an amazing amount of information from your photographers, because they were there at the shows, they knew the guys, and the guys were more inclined to talk to them because they were just photographers. They weren't going to give them up or possibly compromise them. Their cover wasn't going to be blown or whatever. But photographers, for instance, will be vital sources of information. They knew what was going on, and they knew the guys. Wow. Especially ones who've been doing covering wrestling for a long time, because they would have the trust of the wrestlers. Now I've just blown it for all these.
I was going to say, Craig H, we got it. He tried so hard, and he even dropped me in it. But Craig H, we got an answer. He got it all from his photographers. That was it. It's a Finlay Martin's web of sparrows. Yeah.
It's like Deep Throat, isn't it? In All the President's Men. I've just given them up. I've just given them up now after all these years. But no, they would, in many ways, wouldn't rat the guys out. They would just say, oh yeah, I heard this or heard that, and then oh yeah, so and so's this is happening, that's happening, and these people were there. They're in the trenches. They know what's going on. So a lot of photographers who did last with Power Slam as well. I'm not going to mention a name, but someone I know who took photos for a well-known promotion in Tennessee. She knew everything that was going on, and all you had to do was speak to her for 20 minutes, and you just had it all. So that, let's face it, at the end of the day, that's why you and I, Alex, are probably in this business for the gossip. That's what we're
just
really
big old drama queens. That's what it is. Well, I've got one last question. We had more, but obviously we run out of time. But it kind of fits quite well. Ben Matthew Clark asks us, what are the best and worst interviews that you've had to sit through for the magazine?
Well, I mean, that's something that I'm going to disclose in the next book, the Power Slam interviews, which will be out in June. So what can I give you to work with on that one? I will say that the vast majority of people that I interviewed for Power Slam and Superstars Wrestling prior to that were a joy to converse with. Apart from, of course, Alex Shade, of course, and very famous interview for, I think it was issue 103?
Is this the time when you called me and said, Alex, we've got a problem. I've just listened back to your interview, and it wasn't until I typed up I realised that the answers that you gave me were completely not to the questions that I asked. And you said, you're such a politician. It was one of the greatest compliments I had at 21.
Yeah, that was good. Actually, I remember I interviewed you for the first time. I think it was in '99 for our short-lived Daddy or Haystack.
Yeah.
And I remember that was I think without doubt the best of the Daddy or Haystacks interviews. I thought that was you came up with some really good stuff in that. So that was
what happens when you burn the bridges that you spent 10 years building on one page.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing as a wrestler or wrestling performer. You know, in many ways, you want to be careful what you say because you don't want to make things more difficult for yourself in future. But the flip side to that is you want to be entertaining and make an impression with the readers or with the editor or whomever or person that's interviewing you. So you know, and sometimes you can't serve both masters. So to me, the best interviews were always from people who were willing to let loose and really nail the people. I mean, that to me were the best interviews. In some ways, you say, well, these people are fools because they're just burning the bridges or they're doing this or they're making they're potentially causing themselves all sorts of problems in future. But to me, my job was to get the best interview I could or the most entertaining or explosive or controversial interview so that people would find it, be entertained by it. So that was my job. So I always preferred doing the interviews with the wrestlers who were going to give it up. You know what I mean? The people who were going to just say name names and just trash people. They were the best interviews for sure. So, but the vast majority of people that I interviewed were great. There was a few that weren't. Rick Rude, I remember, was really difficult. Bam Bam Bigelow, just been writing about him for the Power Slam interviews. He just didn't. I mean, these are two guys, unfortunately, that are no longer with us. So Bigelow was. He didn't seem to want to do the interview. He just wanted it to end. And I couldn't understand that at all because I always used a middleman to speak to them first and get the number. So at that point, they had the opportunity to say, no, I don't want to do the interview. And lots of people did that over the years. Then I rang him to arrange a convenient day and time for the interview. And then I rang him on that day and time, and he wasn't really interested in speaking to me. So that was a bit weird. So there was others over the years that were hard work. I remember New Jack, when I challenged him a few times, he got really he let me know that he wasn't happy.
That was over the phone, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, it was.
Because you may be getting stabbed and stapled still now.
But I did two interviews with New Jack, one in 2000, I believe, and the second one was, I think, in 2012. And both were, I think both of those interviews were incredible because he was somebody that simply did not care. He would say exactly what he thought, and that's the best person to interview. Wow. The worst person to interview is someone who's there he's just really being very, very diplomatic and politically correct in terms of wrestling, not in terms of whether or not they're going to vote for Jezza Corbin or not. Politically correct, just playing it safe. That was the worst type of interview. Someone who was going to play it safe and really just not give you anything. I'll tell you another guy who was hard work, Brock Lesnar. The first time I interviewed him in 2007, I think it was. Fortunately, I got loads of questions together. Because it was like one sentence answer. And then it was like one sentence answer. And you're like, oh no, this guy he's really not interested in giving me that much. But we kept plugging away. And I felt that first interview was pretty damn good because I asked him so many questions. And there was some interesting stuff in there as well about his lawsuit against WWE in 2004, would it have been 2004, 2005? So there was some interesting stuff in there about that which I didn't know. In fact, quite a lot of interesting stuff about all sorts of things that I didn't know. He was, I wouldn't say he was difficult, but you could see that interviews, if he had the choice between doing the interview and not doing the interview, in my opinion, he would have chose not doing the interview every day of the week. So
it's funny. It's funny because he seems like such a chatty, humorous, conversational kind of guy.
But I felt that that Lesnar interview, when after I'd written it up and everything, because I asked him so many things, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was definitely. There was some interviews over the years you look back and you think, that really wasn't. That should have been better, or we should have cut that down to 1 page, not run it over 2 pages. There was a few of them, but I think overall our success rate with interviews was definitely more good than bad.
Wow. All right. Well, Finn, this has been a great first Finn Martin, a Finn Martin report. I've held that cough in for over an hour now. It just it fell out. But we also have a very, very exciting new podcast project that we will be embarking upon, and it's going to be quite, in terms of podcasts. I'm going to say it's going to be quite historic. That will sound like I'm over-exaggerating it until you find out what the podcast actually is, and then it will make total sense. But for now, Finn, that's pretty much all the time we have. We will be back with another one of these next week. So make sure that you get on the WrestleTalk TV Facebook page and Twitter to go through, of course, your questions for Finlay Martin. We'll have a few more topics to discuss, and we'll be announcing what this new podcast series is going to be. I'm looking forward to it. Finn, it's been great having you.
That's it. Once we work out what it is,
we know. Well, we've been working away here at WrestleTalk Towers. We know exactly what it is, and that's why I'm excited. You know what it is as well.
I know what it is. I'm excited about it. I'm just kidding.
I saw the email chain.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. Yeah, it's going to be really good. It's going to be. I'm looking forward to putting some serious research into this, and really putting together some good stuff. So yeah, and good as you say, it will be historic.
It will be indeed. Right, look, well, listen, thank you for joining us and thank you for listening. Remember, you can listen to this on the WrestleTalk TV YouTube channel, youtube.com/WrestleTalk TV. Of course, on WrestlePod.com as well. $1.99 a month, stack loads of podcasts. I mean, thousands of hours of podcasts are up there. Loads of interviews, hundreds of interviews, some of the biggest names on the wrestling, in the wrestling world, on the wrestling planet, in the wrestling universe. I'm trying to think of the right thing there. And, of course, make sure you check out WrestleTalk.tv and BritishWrestling.tv too. For Finlay Martin, I've been Alex Shane. This has been the Finlay Martin Report. We shall see you next week.